Hello, everyone, and welcome to HU 3120 Science and Technical Communication. Today, we're going to be talking about Chapter 20 Informal Reports. Learning objectives for this section, we're going to be differentiating between informational and analytical reports, write a progress report to indicate the status of a project, write a periodic activity report to account for work activity, write a trip report to summarize work activity during business travel, write meeting minutes to provide a record of a meeting, write a feasibility report to assist decision makers, write a recommendation report to advocate a course of action, write a justification report to back up a recommended action, and finally, write a peer review report to assess a colleague's work. Well, informal reports, the most common types of workplace reports are informal reports. Um, in contrast to formal reports, they really don't require an extended plan. They're prepared fairly quickly and contain little to no background information and really have no front or end matter. And by that I mean there's no, typically there's no table of contents, there's no appendices, these kinds of things. Informal reports are frequently written within an email address, or excuse me, within an email message, but they could also be written as memos, which can be printed or attached to an email, such as a PDF document. Um, but for all intents and purposes, informal reports are typically email messages, emails. In the professional world, decision makers rely on two types of informal reports. These are informational reports, which answer basic questions and include progress reports, periodic activity reports, trip reports, and meeting minutes, things that you have recorded during any kind of meeting sessions. And then there are analytical reports, and these include both information and analysis, and include feasibility reports, recommendation reports, justification reports, and peer review reports. Progress reports monitor the progress of particular projects. They may be written either for internal personnel or outside clients. Working within a specific firm, you may be addressing both at the same time, where you are addressing those within the company and those outside of the company all at once. Um, this progress report is very important to assuage worries and to um, actually convey what in particular is happening within a given time frame to ensure that you are meeting certain goals that you have given, certain deadlines that you've given to your customers and to the people for which you work. Many contracts stipulate the dates and stages when progress will be reported. Some organizations require regular progress reports, daily, weekly, monthly, where others only use progress reports as needed, such as when a project milestone has been reached. When you are typically working with an outside client, they will most times like a weekly update. So guidelines for progress reports, you want to make sure that you provide a clear subject line, present information efficiently and concisely, and use a timeline structure to answer the anticipated questions. If you have an issue trying to anticipate these questions, speak with those within your firm, some of your colleagues that have more experience, that have typically done these far more than you have. Periodic activity reports resemble progress reports in that they summarize activities or a specified period. However, periodic activity reports summarize general activities during a particular period. Okay? Periodic activity reports are almost always internal. Guidelines for these kinds of reports, you want to provide a clear subject line, very descriptive, very clear, nothing antiquated, and nothing nothing hazy, nothing ambiguous. Present information efficiently and again concisely. Make sure your report answers the expected questions, questions that your people are going to want to know. Trip reports focus on business related travel during a given period, and these are some very common types of reports that you will see, even if you extend into, um, even if you go and you work with a big box store like Kmart, Walmart, something like that. They actually use trip reports among their employees quite often. Um, because they actually pay travel experience expenses. These employers need to know that the company is getting its money's worth. Employers also need to know what employees learn through their travels. Depending on where you are, who you work for, depends on the amount of information that you will provide for these trip reports. For some people, they want to know the route, they want to know pit stops, they want to know what you ate, when you ate it, all that good stuff. Other people are just about give me the mileage. But they typically give them some form of paper trail to follow to make sure that they are getting what they pay for. Some guidelines for trip reports. You want to make sure that you take accurate notes along your trip. Make sure that you are saving receipts, that you are logging specific stops. All these things, if you took a trip and you had to bypass road construction, make sure you notate that so that you can perhaps get the extended, get a little bit more money back for your trip. Uh, Make sure that you take accurate notes when and where and what time and how it happened. Okay. Begin with a clear subject line and purpose statement. If you notice throughout these reports, that is fairly popular. And the reason why is because we do not like ambiguous titles or subject lines in technical communication. We want them clear and descriptive. Record the names of people and places, account for times and locations, describes findings completely and objectively, and offer to follow up if they have any questions. Again, saving receipts and saving these things are very important. Meeting minutes are the records for company meetings and are distributed to all attendees and interested parties to track the proceedings and to remind members about their responsibilities. Usually, one person's appointed to record the minutes. Now, that said, um, depending on what organization you're working for, if you are working for an organization that has strict uh, officer roles, you have a treasurer, you have a president, you have a vice president, you have all this stuff, you have a recorder or a secretary. These folks strictly do their jobs. However, if you are working in a team, I highly recommend that you alternate who's taking and recording those minutes. And the reason why I say that is because, and I mean that per meeting. The reason I say that is because if someone is strictly taking the notes and recording meeting minutes and doing all that stuff during the meeting, they may be listening, but they may not necessarily be participating in what's being said. Okay, and you want people to participate within the meetings. So if they don't get to strictly participate in this specific meeting, perhaps have them, rotate it out so that they don't get bogged down and never really get to contribute. Guidelines for meeting minutes. You want to make sure that you take good notes during the meeting. You want to complete the minutes immediately after the meeting while they're still fresh in your head. Okay. As soon as the meeting is over, that is when meeting minutes is typically typed up, and then I I have seldom seen them sent a few hours after the meeting itself. So as soon as the meeting is done, you want to make sure that you are sending that out to everyone who attended the meeting so that they know that their voice was heard. Include a clear title and the meeting date. List all the attendees that were there. Describe all agenda items. Record all decisions or conclusions. Make the minutes easy to navigate. All right, that's important as well. You want to make sure that a great idea here is use of headings and bullet points, so that people can jump directly to what they want to see and what particularly had been passed that they may have genuinely been interested in. And make the minutes precise and clear. Okay, avoid ambiguity. Talk about what happened at this specific time and who was involved. Always keep personal commentary, humor, and sidebar comments out of meeting minutes. Um, while you will see people who will try to be funny and may um, joke around and things like that, this could be a real detriment, especially in the world that we live in. It can be offensive, something that you may see as innocuous or may see as um, relatively um, innocent, others may find offensive. So it's best to keep it strictly to the point and to the facts, right? Make sure that you proofread meeting minutes. You want to make sure that everything is spelled correctly, that you have spelled names correctly. You want to make sure that everything is as it should be before you send it out. And try to anticipate any unintended consequences. Keep in mind, this may go outside of what people have used. It may go outside of strictly being used internally. Some people may get a hold of this and leak it to the media or let other people see it. Make sure you anticipate this kind of stuff and that um, you don't incriminate and you don't obfuscate, whatever a specific issue is. Okay. Feasibility reports help decision makers assess whether an idea, plan, or course of action is realistic and practical. You want to make sure that these reports help decision makers understand the immediacy to the issue. A feasibility report provides answers to questions such as what is the problem or situation, or how should we deal with it? Is this course of action likely to succeed? Do the benefits outweigh the drawbacks or risks? And what are the pros and cons and the alternatives? Remember that these are specific. They answer these questions specifically. They don't just bring the problem up, they talk about a specific course of action that will help hem the problem in. Make sure the subject line is clear, provide background if needed, offer the recommendation early in the document, follow up with details, data, and criteria to support all the claims that you've made. Explain why your recommendation is the most feasible among all choices and end with a call to action amongst the readers and decision makers. Recommendation reports shorten or even skip the feasibility analysis and get right to the recommendation without all the hassle. Recommendation reports, like feasibility reports, may include supporting data, and typically when they are done, they do, especially within, uh, you see feasibility and recommendation reports used synonymously quite often in the public sphere. Or and that can be an issue because they are slightly different. But they also state an affirmative position. Here's what we should do and why within that recommendation, rather than examining whether the approach will work or not. You want to provide a clear subject line, keep the background brief, summarize the problem or situation prior to making recommendations, use an authoritative tone. This means be direct. Don't be snobby. Don't be petty. You want to make sure that you're being authoritative in that you are developing your ethos. You want to make sure that you sound credible. None of this, I think, perhaps we should, or any of this stuff. You want to be specific and clear. Use informative headings so that it's easier to follow, and end with a list of benefits for taking action. Justification reports justify our writer's position by answering the question, why should we follow your recommendation? While many recommendation reports respond to reader requests for a solution to a problem, justification reports originate with the writer who has recognized the problem and has devised a solution. This is a why we did it. You want to make sure that you state the problem and your recommended solution, highlight the benefits of your plan before presenting the costs. If needed, explain how your plan can be implemented. Conclude by encouraging the reader to act. Different reports. There are careers that you could end up in where you will be looking at each and every individual report as it is, where you will have a strict system and procedure or for developing these reports out. So you may use, you know, the feasibility, go into the uh, recommendation, and then go into the justification. But typically, these are um, synonymously used, all called under like one moniker, typically the recommendation report. And they will all have elements expected within your company. But if you look at the actual reports themselves, it's about where that focus lands and where the most scrutiny will be for when you're developing out these reports. They're all going to include a little of each other, but some are going to be scrutinizing specific areas other than another. Peer review reports provide a way for people to give each other constructive criticism and feedback. Constructive criticism. And here's the thing: we live in a society where criticism has taken on this very, very negative connotation. Uh, Criticism, technically, you should not necessarily need constructive criticism. It should just be criticism. But we've had to add the adjective constructive criticism to differentiate that negative polarization that criticism has taken on. Good criticism is helpful. Okay, it's always constructive. Uh, Anything else outside of that is just really an attack. If you're attacking someone before for their efforts or the way that they actually developed out a problem or an issue or they performed, however, if you're just attacking for the sake of attacking, it is pure and simple just an attack. If you are going in and you're giving issues that you found and ways to potentially fix those, right? That's criticism. And criticism sometimes can be a little harsh. Sometimes it can be fairly easy. Sometimes it comes in the form of the compliment sandwich. I'm sure we've all heard of that, where you find something good to tell them, give them something to work on, and then end with something good that you want to tell them. And we coax the ego and the id that way. However, that may not necessarily that could tip that may sometimes be less constructive, where and it's not good to go in and just rip somebody to pieces and give them no feedback on something they've done good. Try to find a couple of things here or there, but try not to leave too much meat on the bone, but at the same time don't overburden them with too much criticism that they are just going in and trying to rewrite the entire thing, or that they may just lose bits and pieces of information that you may have mentioned before, right? Nothing worse than going in and giving this long list of constructive criticism. And it doesn't matter how good it is, if it's just a ton of information, typically they're going to forget the first two, three, or four things and go on to others. So maybe criticize two or three or four good points in a first review, right? And then in a second review, go and focus on two, three, four other things. Okay. Never just overwhelm them with 8, 16 different things all at once. And not only that, it can feel defeatist a little bit. It can feel like, oh, I'm not worthy kind of thing, right? So, and give encouragement, but at the same time, make sure that you're not selling them short. Because such reports are shared by colleagues wishing to preserve good workplace relationships, they must be written very, very tactfully. Don't go in and shred somebody. Don't go in calling people names. And one thing that we typically do as academics is we go in and there is this effect of talking down to someone, and this is extremely detrimental. Um, Try to think of it as, and I wouldn't even necessarily try and say explain it like you're talking to your parents, because sometimes we have a tendency to kind of um, talk down to our parents as well when it comes to this information. So think of it as maybe working with an older colleague who may not quite get it, right? Um, think about it, or a much younger colleague who may not quite get it. So think about it as a way that you are trying to tell them how to do something without making them just become frustrated and just quit altogether. Okay, you want to keep good relationships and keep them positive. All right. Also, when it comes to peer review reports, when you are receiving that criticism, don't try to explain it away. Okay, don't sit there when you get a criticism saying you should change this and then go in and say, well, I did it because of this. That doesn't matter. It ultimately does not matter. What matters is that you will not be sitting with every single person in the world who gets a hold of this review, right? Who gets a hold of this report. When they go and they get this report, other people are going to be having to make their own justifications and insinuations based on what you've said. They're not going to have you there to say, well, I did it because of this. It doesn't matter. If somebody gives you that criticism, just say thank you. Go in and make it so that it's not that way. So you want to start with the positives, okay? Organized by topic area. Always provide constructive criticism. Never just dig at somebody. And if you point out an issue, give a reason or give a potential fix for that issue. Okay? Support your critique with examples and advice and close positively. You want to end on a high note. And this, again, is like the compliment sandwich. You want to end on a high note so that they go out encouraged, not go out defeated. Review questions for this. First, how are informal reports different from formal reports? What is the difference between an informational report and an analytical report? What is the purpose of a progress report? What is the purpose of a periodic activity report? What is the purpose of a trip report? What is the purpose of meeting minutes? What is the purpose of a feasibility report? What is the purpose of a recommendation report? What is the purpose of a justification report? And finally, what is the purpose of a peer review report? I'd like to thank you all for attending this lecture. If you have any questions, feel free to make a comment or let me know. Uh, and I hope to see you all again shortly in HU 3120, Science and Technical Communication. Stay healthy and take care.